Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It's time to catch up on Illinois basketball. Derek Piper joining me, and we got plenty to catch up about, Derek, in the transfer portal. Oh, prep recruiting is happening again. We got two monster additions to the schedule, including a future return to the United Center, which we have been wondering if that's going to happen, but also the NBA Draft Combine with Terrence Shannon and Coleman Hawkins. So it is middle of May, still no offseason, Derek.
Still no sleep, but maybe June. June is when you sleep, but that's when summer workouts start and all that. More work for the players than it is for us. So we're chugging along here. Still 3 open spots. Still a big void with the wing and big guard. Can Illinois still make a splash? That's the big question. And yeah, the draft combine, although Terrence not very much active in that as far as the on-court stuff, but Coleman Hawkins will play in the 5-on-5s, and we'll be interested to see how he looks, although as we've talked about, I don't know that it'll matter as far as him playing in an Illinois uniform again, as we've discussed.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Let's start with the draft combine. I know people want to get into the transfer stuff, and we'll definitely get into that. But the news today is that Terrence Shannon spoke with the media. Our Isaac Trotter was there for us at the NBA draft combine. He's doing great work covering that. But Terrence, for the first time since the bragging rights game, well, one of his really epic games and one of many this season. It's been 6 months since we'd heard from Terrence Shannon, and just listening to the audio, I'm like, oh, I remember I liked talking to this guy. But obviously with his legal situation ongoing, Derek, and really complicating this NBA draft process for him, because he is standing trial June 10th for the allegations in charge of rape and sexual battery here. So he's going to have his day in court, and his accuser testified last week in Douglas County, Kansas. So 17 days before the NBA draft, he will stand trial. And speaking with reporters today, and I got to tell, that group did a really good job of asking him the questions that needed to be asked. He said he hasn't really talked to NBA teams. He's really limited with what he can say based on his lawyers. Now, I don't know if those conversations will be different with potential employers as she's trying to make his money in the NBA. But it's clear that he doesn't have a lot of answers publicly yet. But he did say he looks forward to his day in court. He's not participating in workouts because of a hamstring injury, he said, didn't do his athletic testing. He has really no basketball questions to answer. We've seen it, right? Like the last couple of years, we've seen all we need to see. He is an NBA talent. He is an NBA player who can impact a team next year. But this legal situation, Derek, is really clouding what his draft stock is.
Definitely is. Know that if it does resolve itself in his favor, that he could probably go anywhere from late first round into the early second, maybe mid-second, depending on how teams still view him. I think that if you take that aside, obviously he put up the numbers of a first-team All-American. I know that the AP put him as a third team. Some people left him off. But 23 points a game, was third in the country last year, did it with extreme efficiency, and was essentially an NBA-level player playing in college last year as a 23-year-old, turning 24 before next season. So that is something to monitor and consider when you think about how high someone might draft him. Usually a lot of these things you're projecting and what's the ceiling. Terrence probably is who he is at this point, which is a really, really good player. And we've seen some contending teams like a Miami Heat. There have been some others that have been comfortable taking older players because they might help them in the immediate sense. But yeah, all of that is pushed to the side right now as we wait and see what comes, assuming it's going to happen. I know it's a tentative date, but June 10th when he does go to trial, and how quickly that unfolds. I know we were discussing this yesterday. I read it in an ESPN article that his legal team told Myron Metcalf that expected to have resolution, to have the trial be over by the time that the NBA draft is, which would be a few weeks later. So I find that pretty interesting, and this could really come to a head here very, very soon. So clearly there's been a big weight on his shoulders with this throughout, ever since he was arrested and charged and had this looming. I don't know, and I can't speak for him, and obviously he didn't say a whole lot. Did he think that it would get to this point of going to trial? And that I don't know. Maybe I think that there was talk around that people thought there was a potential for the case to be dropped beforehand, and we'll ultimately see. But yeah, we talked about what it would be for us on the media side. I think a lot of people, and we talked about this throughout the season, it would have been great to at least hear some of these answers during the year. I don't know that fans cared as much, and they loved watching Terrence from the court, and that's what mattered most to them. But now at least to hear something from him was good, and the time is ticking here before we really find out some real answers.
just my personal opinion, he could have done this during the season. He could have addressed this and said, I will have my day in court. I feel good about my character. I believe in who I am. I believe my side of the story, and I will have my day in court. And then, he would have been asked a lot about it during the NCAA tournament, but I thought, especially with the local media, just addressing it up front and then talking about the phenomenal basketball season he had. Now, this still would have clouded somewhat of what was happening, but I think this could have been done earlier, because he did talk about the team and how satisfying it was to go on the run that they did, set records. It's one of the greatest Illinois basketball seasons of all time. And I don't want to be the complaining media guy, but there was just missed opportunities for us to tell the story of that, plus the story of the season. It was weird not to have Terrence Shannon as a spokesperson for that. I understand it from the legal perspective, but I was surprised he talked today when he didn't talk for the months before it. And I felt like he could have said the same things 4 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever it was. But I understand they didn't want any distraction. And I will say, it's weird to say I was impressed by this because the allegations are so serious, but his ability to compartmentalize what was happening and to focus on basketball and to be a phenomenal basketball player during all of this was kind of impressive, right? Given that, his freedom could be up, right, on the line here. And obviously his reputation, his NBA career, and he had one of the best 18-game runs I've ever seen in my life in college basketball.
Yeah, it was all very, very crazy. Obviously, we'll have added context. And I know that sometimes when there is legal resolution, especially if a case is not guilty or dropped or what have you, not enough evidence, and I would be assuming here or just speculating, then you never know maybe what the full story is. But still, for that to have happened and for him to go through what he went through, to hear what he did on the road, that was all something that had to carry a big burden. But he obviously still played at such a high level, one of the best players in the country, if not maybe at times he was, in my opinion, the best player not named Zach Edey in college basketball. So that was extraordinary. It would have been nice to talk some of the basketball angle, talk some of the getting Illinois to the Elite Eight for the first time in 19 years angle. I understand why they did. They just dodged the landmines. I think there could have been some. He could have even been talking basketball, but said a phrase. We even talked about it in how we talked about it on the podcast or in our writing. If you said certain things, it could be construed a certain way that could get blown up in your face. So
we had to be very careful about the language we use regarding Terrence Shannon with the allegations, right?
So I imagine that it was very much so for him, potentially saying a wrong thing that could get twisted a certain way. And so I understand why they did it. Yes, selfishly, it would have been nice to talk to him and always found him insightful and whatnot. But well, again, it's something that is very unprecedented, obviously for us. And I can't remember another instance of this like this, where there's a guy at the combine who has this hanging over his head. So how this turns out will be very interesting.
I thought he was very disciplined with what he said today. At times you could sound standoffish, like he was avoiding things, which he was, but he avoided it. And he avoided those landmines, like you were saying. There's no question Terrence Shannon is done. He's going to the NBA. He's out of eligibility here at Illinois. Coleman Hawkins has another year of eligibility. He is less of a for sure thing. You look at ESPN and The Athletic, both have him outside the top 75 draft prospects. And of course, he has entered the transfer portal, Derek. He has said his goodbye to Illinois. So can we go at 0% of his return to Illinois? The more interesting thing is, given what has been reported, players are making, including Grant Asober, going to Washington, probably butchered that last name, but reportedly $2 million in NIL. If I'm Coleman Hawkins, returning to college seems more likely at this point. I know he wants to go to the NBA, but the money he can make potentially returning to college and going somewhere else, man, like for some of these guys that entered the draft, you got to be rethinking, do I really want to go in the draft, or do I want to come back to school and make more guaranteed money if I'm a second round pick?
Yeah, it's insane. For great Asaber, or however you say it, to make that number at Washington. Number one, I question Washington's allocation of its resources. He played for Sprinkle at Utah State. You couldn't get a discount. You couldn't get a family discount, a guy you're familiar with. So, and not every situation is the same in terms of how much funds are remaining, or teams that have already spent big on certain positions and whatnot. But Coleman, if you look at ESPN and The Athletic, they have him behind Cam Christie as the top uncommitted player in the portal, and Cam Christie's pretty widely expected to stay in the draft, so he could be the number one guy if Coleman were to come back to school, the number one guy in the market. So that would at least be, I mean, I think it'd be very reasonable to say he's at least going to make $1 million, maybe 1.5. What's his true market value? I think that, again, there are some outliers. There's some certain things where you can't say, well, because Osborne made $2 million, maybe Hawkins at least 2, if not 2.5 or what have you. Osborne's a good player. I mean, he put up 17, 18 a game and 9 rebounds. He's a 6'8" post player that's now going to go and play in the Big Ten. So with Coleman, I mean, a two-way, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, like last year we were talking about with Terrence, like a two-way was a non-guaranteed, like $500,000 deal a year.
Non-guaranteed is a key phrase there as well. And we were thinking, can colleges offer that? Boy, it seems like a lot of these schools can, yeah.
Potentially. He could make maybe 3 times as much as that. He's not going to get, barring a surprise, guaranteed money to go to the NBA if he's not projected to be a draft pick. Even if he is picked late second round, mid-second round, those guys usually don't get that guaranteed money. So he'd have to probably, in most cases, when you look at the history, creep up into the early to mid range of the second round, kind of as that baseline of where the guaranteed money is, like Terrence was hoping to get last year. So I don't think that he's going to get there. I still think maybe he could get picked, but I trust guys like Gavoni and Sam Vecini to have an accurate read on what people probably widely think of him. Maybe there's more intel, probably talking to more teams this week, see if he can move the needle in the direction of getting drafted. But even if he were to be told he could get drafted or would get drafted at the very, very end of the draft, financially, it seems like going back to school would make the most sense.
I need to be told I'm a first-round pick if I'm Coleman, right? Based on what we think he could make guaranteed, even if it's not even $1 million, Derek, if we're talking a little less than that, like that's guaranteed money for the most part. Like I would be taking that and using this extra year of eligibility. I know there's got to be some Illinois fans listening to this being like, I can't believe like he would go play somewhere. This is the loyal guy. I love what Coleman told Jeff Goodman on the field of 68 when he jumped on with him and say, listen, I probably didn't do the right thing the last couple of years. Talking with his dad a couple months ago, he's like, hey, we should probably look into going into the transfer portal and testing your market, see what you're worth out there. And Coleman's like, no, I just want to stay here. So he was really loyal and maybe to a fault where he didn't really see his true market value. And now he said, now it's time for me to be selfish. I love Illinois. I love the coaches. I love the players, all those things. But with this extra year eligibility, why would you not be? So I'm not going to fault him. I'm not the Uber fan that's going to watch him play, whether it's in Tar Heel blue or whatever it would be. Like that would be potentially painful. As long as he's not in the Big Ten and he said he won't pull the Luke Goody and play in the Big Ten, I'd be fine with it. If I were an Illinois fan, but I know other fans might feel differently. But I can't blame a guy when this kind of money is being thrown around. Go do that. And Illinois, I can't blame them for moving on because they needed to go fill these needs and probably did a little less expensively than Coleman Hawkins would be.
No doubt. Yeah. And not to say you're going to get the same type of production, veteran leadership, that whole type of thing with Kerry Booth coming in, Benham Rickhouse. So I don't think it was a cheap addition, but definitely less, potentially, a third of what you pay Coleman Hawkins, at least half of what you paid Coleman Hawkins to come back in. And Thomas Lavavicic, I think he was also a guy that I know that he was under the radar, but probably also, again, not a cheap pull away from internationally and probably what some other options were out there. But yeah, with Coleman, he's using his leverage. And in talking to his dad last offseason when he was going through the process, there was a point where there were some hints of transfer portal potentially. And yeah, now I know that after you talked to him during the season, it sounds like his dad was at least mentioning that and putting that on the table, and that Coleman wasn't interested in it. And Coleman regrets that because he sacrificed his ability to go to Illinois and say, how bad do you want me? Because otherwise it was, you can stay in the draft and probably not get picked, or you can come back. And Coleman didn't really have that threat or what have you to go to the table, negotiating table with Illinois, where Terrence, it was more of a legit, like early to mid second round type of thing. And they had to give him, probably 700, 750. And I don't know what Coleman's number was. He hasn't come out and said it. I think it was a lot less than that. I think it was less than $500,000. So now he's going to exercise what his power is, and all the power to him to do that. Yeah, I think fans, of course, Illini fans hate North Carolina. So if it's North Carolina, there's naturally going to be some that are like, how could you play for those guys, the team that beat us in the title game, what have you? I think in large part, everyone loves Coleman. Everyone appreciates the loyalty, will still view him as such. He just got his degree. He just had a tweet from graduation with him and Brad Underwood saying, "Thank you, coach, for everything." Like,
Yep.
I think for the most part, he'll leave on good terms, even if there are maybe the initial kind of shock of him having to edit in another jersey, or you see him in a game for a team you don't like. But other than that, I think he's still going to be fondly remembered here. But yes, I do. To what you said earlier, I do think it's a 0% chance he comes back here.
Not quite. Albert Pujols playing for the Angels for you, Derek. But would it be like Waino suiting up for the Yankees for a year?
Yeah, that's a good description. I think when Jim Edmonds was kind of doing his tour around the NL Central late in his career, there was that as well. So yeah, no, I think Waino in the Yankees would be accurate. Boston Red Sox too, because they had beaten us in the World Series a time or two. So
you feel that, guys? Warmer, sunnier days are calling. And fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart and Keto, or my favorite, Protein Plus. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine with Factor. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore, so you can crush your wellness goals this May with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. So treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. And the best part, you keep kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. So enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. So head to factormeals.com/Illini50 and use code Illini50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% of your next month. That's code Illini50 at factormeals.com/Illini50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. All right, Derek, here we go. Illinois, I think, has had a really good offseason to this point, filling some holes, but they still have one big hole. We know they've been going after really high ceiling wings, guys that could be a starter, guys that could potentially be a star. So can you update us? I mean, it's May 14th. They still got 3 open scholarships, but really just that one glaring spot that I think this team, as construed, could be, I would have as an NCAA tournament team. I don't think I'd have them as a Big Ten title contender quite yet, barring some best case scenarios for some guys in development. But it feels like they're one player away from potentially being a Big Ten title contender and really a nationally relevant top 20 kind of program.
Right. And you would think that they would still have a decent chunk of change NIL wise, just kind of who they've been in the mix for. Igor Dimin overseas, the Russian who plays in Spain, and doesn't sound like, although he hasn't made an announcement, doesn't sound like that's in the cards for Illinois any longer. I think the asking price got pretty high, and someone that's a projected lottery pick in 2025, but 18 years old, and Illinois had high interest and definitely worked it for a number of months and went over and saw him when they went on their overseas trip. But there's been some buzz for BYU. There's been a little bit of Arkansas in there. There's kind of some wonders of where he'll ultimately end up, but that it was maybe north of $1.5 million ultimately in NIL, what he would have cost. So they were in the mix.
This is the conversation. Like, Tulip and I were talking about, like, we have to have these conversations now about resource allocation. Like, yes, you want to get talent, Derek, but you got to get return on investment. You're probably never getting the return on investment again that you got in Marcus Damask last year, but you got to find guys that are values as well that you can build a roster around. And let's be honest, if you're paying $1.5 million to an 18-year-old who doesn't produce like a All-American, the rest of the guys are gonna be sitting there going like, what's that guy making? Like, so you got to think of that stuff too.
100%. Yeah. I think there's a lot of different things you got to keep in mind. The locker room for sure. Going back to the boosters and asking those same people for the money. Now, I think if he still got picked in the first round, they would probably be satisfied with having Illinois' name on a first round pick, but you could have money attached to Sky Clark, so to speak, or for an example, a guy that shows up and plays like 13 games and he's out. So
dead money, right? Like dead money, like in the NFL.
Yeah, when those things don't work out, it's hard to go back to the same places, especially ones that have other places to put their money. I know usually the people you're asking have a lot more where that came from, but still, I think you want to keep those boosters, those supporters very happy and feeling like that they're putting their money in the right place. So, but yeah, I do think that chemistry wise, locker room wise, that is important as well. And that's why Brad talks about, and you mentioned his last availability, the personality test they run with guys in the portal and as they're evaluating and just kind of what motivates people. So there are players that are worth a lot of money to programs, to the market right now. But yet I think there's even another conversation of, would you want to give that money to an 18-year-old? And there are exceptions. Like you could sell me on giving it to Cooper Flagg at Duke. We're going to talk about him here a little bit later. You could sell me on giving it to AJ DeBonsta, who's in the 2025 class. But yeah, I think.
Yeah, I thought Igor might be worth $1 million to have a first round draft pick, right? Yeah. Like a starter plus a first round draft pick. Once you get past that, it's like, just thinking about it, what we hear, like if you have a first team All-American, like Hunter Dickinson, probably worth $2 million, right? Like if you have an all Big Ten first team player, probably worth $1 million, like Terrence Shannon probably was. Starters, probably in that $300,000 to $500,000 range, right? And then you go down the list. It's crazy. This is the way we talk about it, but that's how I think of. And 1.5 for a guy that's 18, don't know what he's going to be next year. Like that's getting a little past my price range.
I agree with that. Now, I think that the counter to it would probably be if you have to get the best return or value on a guy, you're not going to win these bidding wars. And Illinois still has the need for a big piece. At least that's kind of can take them up another tier into that Big Ten title conversation, at least top 5 in the Big Ten type of range. Again, not saying that the base that they have right now, they have added some talented players. I like what they've done so far, but without that splash at the 2 spot, the big guard, the wing, I think that, or proven scorer, even though Igor wouldn't have been that, at least in college, he would be 18 years old and coming over talented and skilled, but not that in terms of what college is. But yeah, I think that's kind of one thing you could counter with, as far as when we talked about AJ Storr, was that too big of an ask? Was Kadari Richards they were in on? I don't think it was really because of money. I think he wanted to stay East Coast, but there have been some other instances, not only for Illinois, for other teams out there, as they're thinking about how to spend their money, how much they can go. If you have it, sometimes maybe you got to overspend to get what you need, get what you want.
Yeah, you know how I feel about AJ Storr at the Big Ten tournament and watching that guys, and we're hearing rumors about him entering the portal. I'm like, I'd pay that guy a lot of money to be on my team. And he got it from Kansas, but I would have been maybe a little bit more aggressive on that one. But understand, like, some people didn't like the way he played, maybe the personality a little bit, but man, he's a hell of a player. But that's the question now, Derek, is if you pass on that for Demon, the price of him or some of these other guys, what do you have? What are the other options? And how much will they cost with the market dwindling here? I know scholarships are being taken up, but there's still teams in real desperate need of really good players. So what are some of the options we should be looking for on the wing?
If you want to go with guys that Illinois has been attached to, you can go with AKA Mongolian Mike. I've been practicing the last name, Mike Sharavjamps.
Sharavjamps, yeah.
Sharavjamps. Okay, there it is. From San Francisco, also at Dayton, his freshman year, just played his sophomore year at San Francisco. A guy that was in the G League Combine last summer around this time. So someone that is very intriguing from a skill set standpoint, 6'8", can do a lot of different things. He can handle the ball. He can do some playmaking with the ball in his hands. Maybe that secondary creator that I think you'd be looking for. Has the ability to shoot it. I know that this past year, I think he's in that 36% three-point range. Off the catch is really good. And that catch and shoot spot up roll, about 39%. So really high efficiency overall when you're looking at some of the numbers from this past year. Catch and shoot in particular at the rim, I think 66%, 68% at the rim this past year. It's just a lower volume than maybe what you're trying to glean too much from, because he's a below double-figure scorer this past year as far as his averages. And one kind of thing to nitpick or to say the other side of the coin, I was looking at some of his KenPom numbers against top 100s, and it was 33% from the field, 21% from three. So someone that is, I don't know if I wouldn't call him a project, but he is somebody that if you're trying to think of him in kind of that starting role, someone that addresses kind of what you need or plays up to his full potential. I think that's another thing. You look at the promise, the skills, can the production match? You do got to get more development wise out of him. So Illinois is one of three. I know that St. Mary's and Utah are the other two. And Illinois is at least considering him as an option, pursuing him. Is he their top A option? I don't think so. And I don't blame people if they look at him, and I'd be curious in your thoughts on him. But if you're thinking of him in terms of no age, I wrote about this over the weekend, no AJ Storr, no guy from Memphis, no Igor Demin, no Kadari Richmond, and you get him, he's going to only be viewed as a disappointment in that context, which I get it. Yeah. As far as the skill set goes, he's got some stuff to work with.
Yeah, I think you'd be thinking of him as like going into sophomore year. RJ Melendez is kind of a, length. He's it's different skill set, but just like that kind of role, I would be thinking for him more than this is a go-to scorer on our team. I think then it'd all be about Ty Rodgers and Trey White. Like you're rolling with those guys. That would be the case.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. You would try to probably have Trey White be someone that might already be a guy that's being overlooked a little bit too much and really take that next step and be back in. I know that after his USC year was an all freshman and it was someone that was on NBA radars. If he really clicks this year and plays up to even his high school prospect billing, then you wouldn't need as much from Mongolian Mike in year one, and Ty Rodgers too. I think with the shooting they have, as we talked about, he can be someone that if he takes another step with his offensive game in particular can really thrive. So he's one of those. Miles Kelly's another one of those. I give credit to Isaac Trotter, our guy, for name dropping him in an article last week. And I know that we've heard that they're looking into that one. Georgia Tech wing, 6'6", 180. So a little bit more on the lanky end, but definitely does have the positional size as far as height goes. And I think there are questions, and he's probably, I wouldn't say he's super polarizing, but he's one of those where he's a stat guy on a bad team. And that's something sometimes people look into that, and somebody's got to score on teams that aren't very good. Georgia Tech wasn't good last year. But if you look at, 14 a game, 6 rebounds in the ACC, that's a proven productive player in a high major conference. And I know that Isaac really hit on his 3-point percentages in ACC play a lot better than his overall percentage last year, 32% on the season versus 39% in ACC play. Some of the analytics say great catch and shoot guy 2 years ago. Last year struggled in that, about 30% versus 42% the previous year. So he has it in him.
What I've heard, Georgia Tech did not run much. Was not an impressive kind of Damon Stoudemire output there. He's the head coach there, and I just heard they didn't run great stuff. So a lot of him shooting contested stuff there.
Yeah, and that certainly matters. Shot selection, shot quality. And if Kylan is able to break things down like they hope that he can, if Rickhouse can play make as that bigger guy that's skilled and can open up some opportunities for guys that will be lower down the list of who's really drawing the top of the scouting report, top defenders. And yeah, I think that quality of shot, and you look at the catch and shoot, you look at the ACC numbers, he's a guy that, like I said, proven productive player at a high major conference. And I think there's reason to be intrigued about what he could do. And I'd have him higher probably than Mongolian Mike. Of course, you do have to consider what NIL prices would be like. And I haven't seen a whole lot about Miles Kelly in terms of suitors and everything, but don't mind him being an option for sure.
Any other guys we should know about? I know Illinois is probably a little bit more incognito with their search right now as they try to keep other schools from knowing what they're thinking.
Well, you have this thing, and I'm not saying that they care about this, but if we mention somebody, then they get 15 or 20 fake crystal balls on Twitter, and then that stuff just blows up and whatnot.
That happens.
Shout out to the fake insiders out there. You guys put in a lot of work.
Love the anonymous accounts, man. Love you guys.
Got to love it. If you're going high end, high hopes, still maybe a home run swing out there left to take. Jeremy Watkins from FSU. He's going through the combine right now. Haven't been a lot out there in terms of he's a no contact guy in the portal, although I've been talking recently. And if you're thinking no contact means they're not talking to anybody, you're fooling yourself, especially their agent. Their agent's job is to go out there and seek out some opportunities and see what the market says and those type of things. But if Illinois, which
it's time to be an NIL agent, by the way.
I would say so, yeah. If Illinois still has some money left in the piggy bank, and it probably need a lot of money if he does go back to college. I know that one of the major outlets, that's ESPN, The Athletic, has him as like a mid to late second round pick. A number of others between the Ringer, the ESPN, The Athletic, 2 of the 3 have him undrafted. But if you look at his profile, I think he's a really, really good Terrence Shannon mold type of player, because he's got good size. He's an explosive athlete, one of the best athletes at the combine right now. Downhill threat, can get to the free throw line at will, good defender, and could bring a lot to you. Would be thought to be probably an all conference, if not maybe threatening on a first team all league guy if he were to come in to Illinois. So they've taken big swings so far. I think he's one big swing left to take if he comes back to school, and I would definitely monitor that one. And before we move on, another international guy.
Ooh.
Yeah. This is another name from Lithuania. If I can get this one right. Do you have it down?
Is it Kasparas, that kid?
Kasparas, Jaku, KJ.
KJ, there you go.
KJ from Lithuania, who plays in Spain, same league as Igor Demin, and they actually did battle against each other in the – you got the name?
Jakashonis?
There you go.
Kasparas Jakashonis?
I lean on you for the pronunciations.
I've been learning my Eastern European, like, you know, when they got the accents over them. I've been learning what that means. So shout out to some of the people with Croatian backgrounds informing me about like how they're all pronounced. So learning more about those. But yeah, sorry, we probably butchered that one too.
You take the lead, and I'm just going to follow. But I'll give you the stats. So 26 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists in the 19U final game. He plays for Barcelona. Igor plays for Real Madrid. Yes, those are the same names of major soccer clubs, but they're playing basketball over there in 19U. 6 for 12 from 3. Very good three-point shooter. You look at his full body of work over this past season, about 38% from 3, 19 points a game. The league that he played in over in Spain, he was actually more productive in just about every category over Igor Demin this past year. Now, Igor thought to be, of course, more of a prolific NBA type of prospect. I haven't seen. I looked into the same ESPN 2025 mock draft, and Gavoti doesn't have KJ in it. So while Demon's like a top 10 pick. So
this kid's still 17, by the way.
Yeah, 2 weeks away from turning 18. He's really intriguing. And again, you think about, you know, what does that ultimate NIL number become for someone that's going to be 18 years old when they play college? But, you know, Jeff Alexander's had some ties to Lithuania before, had a big man there at Evansville, was really good. And they've been working the international scene, and some of these same, you have some correlations with some of the people you get in with that can point you in the right direction or have some influence over guys' decisions or just who you want to get tied into. So Illinois, that's a guy that they have been familiar with. Definitely impressed with what he did against Igor here recently, and I think they'll be involved in that one as we push forward.
When you make an Elite Eight, Derek, there's the last point I want to make before we get into the schedule. It makes those fans eager to do that again. My expectation after losing all that you lost was not for Illinois to win the Big Ten or to make the Final Four. Maybe that's my problem, like that I don't set the expectations that they're going to go back to back with Elite Eights. I think they could if they had the right piece here. I think they've had a really strong offseason to this point. Like, to this point, I think the additions they have made at the positions have been better. Like, Ivisic is better than the center I thought they would get. Rickhouse, I am extremely high on. Like, I think he'd be an all Big Ten player. Kylan Boswell's a true lead guard, a true point guard. I think they did still miss that at times last year, as good as Marcus Damask was. Like, Trey White and Kerry Booth is like your 4th and 5th guys that we really aren't talking much about right now, I think is really good. Then we'll see who else they add. So, like, I feel like they could add a starting caliber wing and be a really good team and be one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the Big Ten and potentially top 5 or 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. So I understand the angst of until they add that piece, but I don't know. I have some confidence they'll add at least a starting caliber impact guy, even if it's Sharav Jumps. Like, that's a guy that's going to be in your rotation most likely. And then you're counting on Ty Rodgers to take a step forward and Trey White to be pretty good. But I don't know, the development and just the pieces fit for me. So I'm still high on what they've done this offseason. I get some of the angst about you're potentially one piece away from being great, but that's hashtag Illini problem. That's a good problem to have at this point. So I've just watched so much bad basketball. We've covered so much bad basketball that I still think this could be one of the best rosters Brad Underwood has had. I know, guys, but there is 6 top 60 prep prospects on this roster, guys who have proven themselves. So I still feel like this roster's been a pretty good overhaul here so far.
No, I agree with you. I like the pieces they've added so far. Kylan would have been and was, as soon as the season was over and there was buzz that he might be out at Arizona, was the point guard that I wanted if I was, the GM and in those meetings. That it made just too much sense. The connections that Illinois had, Champaign native, really like his upside, 19 years old. And Rickhouse, I agree with you. A guy that you've stamped him as your guy. If I would have stamped him as my guy, he wouldn't have gone here. He would have ended up picking Villanova at the end. So
hey, Boswell, was that your guy? Did you take credit for that one?
That's safe, right? We still got some of these like tampering NILs. I think he's safe. I think he's safe coming home to Champaign. So we can say that he's my guy. I agree. I think Thomas Love, even though I think if he was coming from like the Mountain West, some people would probably be more excited or be more willing to trust it just because he's international and because you've seen some guys like a BBV, like a Matisse Facile, like Nicola Moretti, of course, varying levels of success or how long they stayed. Zachary Perrine's on the very short end of that, but really digging in more on who he went against, it's impressive. It's really impressive.
YouTube the USC summer game. Yeah. Like he looked like he belonged, and that was a USC team with probably multiple first-round picks on the team.
Right. No. Yeah. Guys in college, that's easily relatable. Guys who have been drafted, guys who have had a cup of coffee in the NBA and those type of things. So I like him as a piece. I don't know the defensive side because we have spent a decent amount of time about like they want real rim protection. They want maybe a top-notch shot blocker. He's not that. I'd be surprised. I think he's more of a guy I'm banking on offensively, impacting the game. Defensively, of course, he's got legit size at 7 foot. If he really is 250, I'm not saying, I do question a little bit. Coleman Hawkins listed at like 225, 230, and then yesterday's 215. So there's always some of that.
Barely 6'8" shoes, yeah.
Yeah, he does look like he's got a foundation for some strength, and of course, Adam Fletcher's going to add to that. I think that it could be disappointing, a missed opportunity if you don't get that wing. Like if you don't get a impact ready starter quality wing, then I think that there's worthy of some criticism there because there'd be questions of what went wrong. Was there not enough NIL money? Was there less NIL money than what Illinois needed or expected? I know the market now. If Great Osobor is getting $2 million, I know it's an outlier probably. A $2.5 million to $3 million collective, like going into an offseason needs to increase. And I'm not saying Illinois has been poor here this offseason as well. Or you just missed. You missed in some spots, maybe didn't overspend in some spots where maybe you should have. But because I think I think point guard last year, obviously you had a lot of opportunity to sell. Ton of opportunity to sell. You had NIL money. You prioritized it. This is even to another level, I think, because in terms of what you have to offer, because Terrence is such a great example, a poster child of what you can do at Illinois at that position, at that usage, at that NIL number. So I would be disappointed if they didn't get a starter quality guy at that spot, but I still really like the other piece. I do agree with you. If they get a starting caliber big guard wing, they're in contention in that top group of the Big Ten, I would imagine, because there's just so much turnover, so much unproven around the league. But yes, at Illinois, and it will be hard when you have like 10 new guys coming in, but a lot of teams, a lot more turnover than what the general numbers would say.
Yeah, there's risk to all this turnover for sure. And yeah, I just don't think there's a failure of an offseason if they didn't get David Jones or AJ Store would have been one of the best offseasons in the country if they did. And you could potentially be a national contender. So yes, there has been some opportunity lost here, but I still just like the way this roster is shaken up. But yes, this last piece will be very, very important. Plus, Derek, they got a really tough – go ahead. Yeah, go.
I will add, if some want to say no AJ Storr, no David Jones, failure, you could have said no Ray J. Dennis last year, failure, and you would have been very, very wrong.
I just feel like this team still has avenues to be pretty dang successful, even without that player, because listen, I've talked about Ty Rodgers. I love his fit on this roster. I think Trey White can be very, very good. I think Hummerkaus is better than most people assume he's going to be. I think Avicic can be a really good big man right away. It's just a different kind of roster. Terrence Shannons are hard to come by, man. They're really hard to come by. They're really expensive. Other teams want them. So I just feel like there's going to be a different kind of roster, but I think they're going to be able to score. I have no question about that. It's just do Rodgers, do White. That there would be more pressure on those guys. But I've always said I'll roll with Ty Rodgers, and I do think the roster around him can be good. And Trey White, I think, has some untapped offensive potential just because he was on such a bad team last year.
Agree with all that. I also think another angle of it, if the 2-year window works, if maybe next year's the tournament, but you don't go far, but then you get a number of those guys back, say Kylan comes back for another year, you get a Avicic for a second year, Trey White for another year, and then you obviously bring in
senior.
Ty's a senior, Merez is a sophomore, you bring in DGL, hopefully, as a junior, you bring in Jeremiah Fears. It'd be a really good team.
I didn't even mention Gibbs Allhorn. Maybe he takes a huge step forward. I don't want to count on all those things. Like, again, I think you'd be counting on a lot of best case scenarios for Rodgers, White, Gibbs Allhorn, but at least you'd have some options as somebody next to Boswell.
For sure. No, I definitely agree with that. But yeah, DGL, I think along with Ty and Trey White in there as well, but the two returning guys could be, as we said before, major X factors. At least right now, you need DGL at this point, and we'll see what that other ad is. And I'm definitely not counting him out because he's definitely got talent.
Well, and let's talk about this. They need some talent because they got a heck of a non-conference schedule that they are putting together. We already know Tennessee is coming to State Farm Center. Can't wait for that one. They should be one of the better teams in the country yet again, despite losing some talent. Barnes has built a heck of a program there. But now we hear that Illinois will be playing Arkansas in Birmingham, Alabama, and they also playing
Alabama.
All right, Birmingham, Alabama. Or Alabama, yes, in Birmingham, Alabama, my bad. And then Duke in Madison Square Garden. Not sure if that's the Jimmy V Classic again, but Illinois has kind of become a stalwart of the Jimmy V Classic, and Duke always travels very well there. So Alabama and Duke are top 10 teams in the country going into next season, regardless of what happens, I think, moving forward here, Derek. So this is a marquee schedule. Illinois will not be playing in the Emerald Coast Classic. You reported that last week. They still have to make that up from the COVID year where they were kind of slotted to play that. So they still have some availability that is left here, but I love this. I love scheduling studs and duds in the non-conference because that is what you're rewarded for, playing really, 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 really tough opponents and then really bad opponents that you can blow out. That's what the net rewards at this point, and I would imagine that's what Brad Underwood is trying to build here.
I agree with that. I do think that if you can find maybe another Oakland at home type of situation, that could be good. Although there's more risk this year with a newer team, and you don't want to take. I think that probably still would have been I don't know if they ended up being a quad 2. Probably would have been a quad 3 loss if you would have lost to them, even though they were for a stretch there, a couple days, an NCAA tournament darling for having knocked off Kentucky. But a nice little test on your home floor that you should win, and you did.
Yeah, or Colgate, right? Like that kind of team.
Yeah. Colgate for sure. But yeah, I mean, swinging big, it reminds me of Tom Izzo. And I'm glad that we're not, at least for Brad's sake, for Illinois fans' sake, that we're not having portal conversations. This reminds me of Tom Izzo because I think that would be a bad thing. But scheduling-wise, it does remind me of what Tom Izzo's done a lot of his tenure at Michigan State, scheduled very aggressively in the non-conference, even in years where there are questions about his roster or it will take longer time for his team to play up to its full potential because you're not going to lose anything if you lose those games because those are quad 1 games, quad 1A games, and they're not going to hurt your resume. There's so much more to gain from winning that versus there is from losing it in terms of the downside of it. So I like that standpoint. And if you dig deeper into it, like Duke, for as talented as they're going to be, I mean, they're bringing in 4 or 5 stars. Cooper Flagg's going to be one of the stories of college basketball. They do have 2 rotational starting caliber guards coming back as well, but they're the only 2 guys from that roster from last year that are returning. So there are a whole lot of new faces too. So I think that makes even more sense for Illinois' standpoint, being a talented, semi-younger, newer team to each other versus a team that's in a similar spot. So I like just the stage, of course, using your appeal from an Elite Eight, then to get on a big stage like MSG, playing Duke, it's going to be an ESPN game or a Fox game or what have you.
And prepare yourself now for the Cooper Flag telecast, okay? It's okay. They're going to be talking about Duke a lot. They're going to be talking about Cooper Flag a lot. Be prepared. Just go win the game, and then they'll talk about you.
For sure. Yeah. You're going to have a lot of NBA scouts in the building, so that's something to like if you're Kylan or Trey White, or if they get somebody else that's on that radar as well. So I think that who's going to guard Cooper Flag, I think that's a fun conversation that's already started around Atlanta Nation. Maybe is Merez the best option in terms of athleticism? I don't know. I don't know if I love the idea of Ben Henriquez guarding him, but we'll figure that out. You got some months to dive into that.
Ty Rodgers
standpoint. Yeah, Ty Rodgers.
I throw on him. Then Alabama, Grant Nelson's back. Mark Sears, All-American, has to make a decision. Cliff Amori is now at Alabama. They're returning a lot. That's going to be a really, really good test for Illinois with the team that's got talented young players and talented old players.
Yeah, for sure. Grant Nelson was a huge addition back to the roster after he had a decision to make in terms of going in and testing the NBA waters. He was really, really good in the NCAA tournament, had a great game against North Carolina. I think he played really well in that UConn game as well. Speaking of the NCAA tournament and that run to the Final Four, Mark Sears was incredible. That whole tournament, put up like 24 a game, just a pure bucket getter. And if he comes back to school, I think that just based on Alabama's like a preseason top 10 team without him, they get him. Kansas maybe still tops them with all that they've done, but they have a legit argument to be preseason number one. I think at worst preseason number two, and that would be just a heck of a talented team, heck of a test. And why not shoot your shot if you're Illinois? And I love about this series, as I know we're going to talk about here, the return game being at the UC. And I think that people out there are going to argue, especially season ticket holders at State Farm Center, and I'm not going to push back on it. Like, I think home and homes are the best option. I think it's the best option for everybody to go to a road venue that's really cool. And Tennessee was awesome to experience. 21,000 that they played against last year.
Arizona coming here a couple of years ago.
Yep. Tennessee coming here this year as a top 20 projected team. But I do think it's the right time if there is a time to revive the UC game, and I think there are reasons to do it, as we're going to talk about. I think this is the right time to do it for Illinois. You get the right opponent. And with Nate Oates signed and sealed there, at least as much as you can be, extension through 2030, would further expect Alabama to be a national player. And that's what you need. You need your own appeal from your program success, and you need an opponent that draws. And I think that Alabama would be one of those there, and finally can get some butts in the seats of the USC for an Illinois game.
Yeah, that United Center game had just become so depressing. Yep. Right? The level of you had 3 years out of 7 that UIC had to be your opponent. You had to bring in New Mexico State. You lost to them. You made the big whole Lou Henson game out of it, and there was only 5,000 fans there. BYU, you shipped them in here, and it's just like lackluster. And then you're just a bad program at that point, and there just wasn't the excitement to play that game. So I thought Brad Underwood, who took 2 bad losses, including Ohio State, you had to do a Big Ten game. You only had 5,000 people there for a Big Ten game, and you're throwing away a home game for that? Didn't make any sense. So I got why Brad Underwood and Josh Whitman said, no, we're not doing this. Maybe when we get back. Well, now you're back. Now you're at the peak. And the other factor of this, Derek, is one, because you're good, you're going to get fans there. You're going to get good opponents to draw you. And you kind of do the neutral site flip here with Alabama. But you also have more availability now because the Big Ten ACC Challenge, that game is no longer on your schedule. So the Gavitt tip-off games, that's over. So the last 2 years, you've had this inventory kind of open up to where you can get Tennessee to come here and, you can go play a United Center game against another top 10 opponent. So as long as they keep getting opponents like this, I don't mind if get one at home, get one at the United Center. That'd be fantastic. So the increased inventory with the Big Ten, at least for now, staying at 20, makes a lot of sense for Illinois to do this now because man, fans are gonna be pumped up for that. And I know so many fans up in the Chicagoland area, like they come down here for all these games. I don't mind giving them one game up there, as long as you have one really marquee non-conference game at home. I think that'd be a good thing.
No, I fully agree with that. I think that's the great compromise is having that high major team coming into your building, or at least schedule the home and home, so it's every other year at least.
Yep.
And we'll see if this UC just getting Bama back in there in 2 years, not this year, but the upcoming year after that, doesn't mean it's going to be an annual game at the UC either. But I think it's a great launching point. I think the timing makes a lot of sense. There are a number of reasons why I think the timing makes sense, because as we talked about here recently, the 2-year window, Illinois on that second year of what they could bring back, having Jeremiah Fears. I think it's great to let Merez go back to Chicago and play on that United Center floor, something that he's probably dreamed about doing ever since he was a kid, and to have that exposure in the city of Chicago. I think it means a lot to the basketball community up there, to have the site of Illinois basketball when they matter. When they matter, I think that you can obviously bring recruits in, not to dive too down the rabbit hole, but you look at 2026, 2027 in particular with Jackson Davis and Davion Thompson and Devin Cleveland. Like, that's a trio that, our buddy Joe Hendrickson has tabbed as one of the more exciting young groups coming from the state, especially in that Chicagoland area, they've had in a long time. So to get those guys at those games as Illinois recruits would be a big deal. Thought about it this way too. Io DeSumo on the Bulls, Io sitting courtside, maybe with some buddies from the team. Like, these are all great things for Illinois to flex and to use.
And we know DeMar is going to sign with the Bulls again, so just having him courtside wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, I mean, there's a ton of Illini fans in that area that will have proven through the years that they will turn out when the game matters and when the opponent matters and the program matters. And even if you're in Champaign, it's a 2-hour drive. It's a 2-hour drive up there. They've had 20,000 when Gonzaga came to town. I think it was 2009, 2010. Arizona came in the mid-2000s, and there was like 21,000. So they even like Auburn, I think that was that the early Gross era or late Weber era? That was like 18,000.
Yeah, I think that was early Gross. I think Tracy Abrams had a big game that day. He had a 28 or something like that. Yeah, like Oregon showed up, I think in 2014. It was a good crowd. Dylan Brooks was awesome in that game. So yeah, there was still some like mid 15,000, but like once that Gross era hit, man, it was just went really downhill, and it was both the opponent and your own quality of play. So thinking of this, Derek, obviously this is a good start with Alabama, given where they're at with Nate Oates. That's a national brand now. I think the basketball program has proven itself as a national brand. Who's atop your list to bring in next to the United Center?
I'm going to say the first name that comes to mind, I'm not going to say because I want Kansas in a home and home. Kansas City and Chicago. You could get that done. You could make that
easy. And Self and Underwood are buds. So I think that's going to happen.
That'd be fun. I wouldn't be against it. I just want
I want to go to Fog Allen
game and to do Fog Allen. Yeah. Selfishly, I want to go to Fog Allen. So that's kind of maybe where it really roots. That's a good question as far as who else.
I'll throw some others at you. I would do Gonzaga again.
Yeah.
With Gentry there, like I think they both have a lot of respect. You do the Seattle thing, you do Chicago. That would make a lot of sense. Texas, I think would be really cool. Because you can go to, I mean, I would be fine going to Austin, but maybe that's more of a home and home. But you could do it in Dallas if you want to. That's an easy flight for some Illini fans as well. Those are some of the teams that come off the head right away. Like I thought back in the day when they were struggling to get opponents, I thought Marquette made sense.
Yeah.
So maybe one game could be something like that, but I'd love for it to be the North Carolinas, the Dukes of the world. Like getting North Carolina here, and maybe you go to Greensboro or Charlotte. That'd be really cool too.
No, I love that idea. Maybe play UConn again at some point. That would be certainly a pretty attractive sell.
Right. Go to Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could even do Houston. Houston's not a bad idea. You play at the Rocket Stadium, and then bring Calvin Sampson and company up to Chicago. Another one that makes logistical sense, and they're a good program. They haven't been maybe as good here recently, a tournament team, but like Florida, especially if Florida is more sexy, more nationally relevant. Play Orlando, play Chicago. I think that's always another one that I've had in the back of my mind. Of course, it's not Billy Donovan level Florida, but I think that's one that's should be on the list.
Baylor, Villanova.
Yeah, Baylor.
Some of these places, I think you can schedule something pretty cool. Yeah, those would all be pretty cool. And then I'm thinking of like home and homes, and something like Creighton would be really cool.
Yep.
Would you do Iowa State? Is there upside there? That's a really good program.
I'd play them.
Yeah.
That's a cool arena too. I mean, I think they're respected enough. I mean, what they've done, they're top 10, top 15 a lot of times. Of course, Kentucky would be great.
How about Arkansas? I mentioned Arkansas because Arkansas has been on the mind this offseason.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's get everybody back together.
I like that for sure. What else? Yeah, I mean, Arkansas with Cal there for sure. Yeah.
Right. That'd be fun. All right, Derek, last thing, prep recruiting is still a thing that exists, and the EYBL is this weekend. Is there anything we should know leading into that?
I will have a lot more to share after going over there this upcoming weekend, but it's the first live period for prep recruiting, which I think is a good idea. It used to be you'd have 2 lives in April or maybe late April one, and then early May another one. But so many coaches are so distracted, and for good reason, by the portal. You push it back a little bit more. So this is the first weekend that coaches can get out and see prep recruits in action. Jeremiah Fears has been going off so far in the first 2 EYBL sessions. This will be the third one. And a chance to see him, chance to see AJ DeBonsta. I do think, and I believe Brad when he says they will put a little bit more emphasis back in 25. I think they want to take some big swings, especially already having Jeremiah in the fold and knowing that he's a guy that can maybe attract some other pieces. So they've been involved with DeBonsta. I think they're going to go after, and Orlando's probably got some guys in the New York area, as he usually does, that they'll take some runs at. So. And I think Illinois' philosophy probably will be swing big. If you can get those guys, great. Don't mess around too much probably with the fringe guys or guys that may take some time, let them go somewhere else, maybe catch them in the portal type of thing. But, even some younger guys, Gabe Solarski playing on the 26 Mean Streets team, Jackson Davis, as I mentioned, Davion Thompson in the 2027 class. So seeing some of the younger side, younger group as well. But, yeah, I want to see Jeremiah against the top competition and catch my eyes on DeBonsta. And it'll just be cool to see where Brad and Orlando and those guys are out watching and be able to report on it.
Jeremiah Fears still class of 2025 recruit, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Glad we could clear that up. He's really good. I'm a big fan of his. He reminds me so much of Tyson Walker, only in bigger. Like he's gotten a lot bigger in the last couple of years and just a bucket getter, man.
Super talented offensively. Great handle, really dynamic handle off the dribble, just bucket getter with his shot making, and high upside. High upside, especially as his body continues to develop and whatnot. But sticking in 25, I think, is a great option. I think in talking to that family, I know that Jeremiah's got some itch to come a little earlier and wanted to maybe jump into 24 and say, hey, I'll come play your point guard this year. But I think long-term it'll make more sense for him. I think that entry point, as we talked about before,
Christian Lander
is really important.
Christian Lander. That's all I remind. Like those small guards, I just don't think it's the best thing for him. Like another year of development, and he's getting good development, right? Playing one of the best programs in the country. Like he'll have his time and he can play right away. He can play right away if he's an 18, 19-year-old freshman as opposed to 17, 18.
No doubt. Yeah, I think as the NBA looks at you, they're going to want to see their first impression of you in college. You want to be able to go in there and pop. And I think that with Illinois, of course, getting Kylan, I think Kylan might even tell you. I don't know. He was a solid role player his first year at Arizona, but since then is obviously still in college and on the younger side, as Jeremiah would be if he reclassed. But
I don't know if that helps Kylan. Like I don't think Kylan's like a huge sell for enrolling early. Like he was good as a sophomore. Like his freshman, he barely played. Like
right.
If you can handle that and you're all about development, I don't think Jeremiah Fear is going to want to come in and be like, yeah, I'm the 10th guy on the roster.
No,
I don't think that's him.
Definitely not. So play at that national stage, push for 5-star status, which he has on ESPN. Maybe he can do that for 24/7 as well, and just keep doing his thing and maybe being a McDonald's All-American type and get fully ready for college to play then as you're designated age group. And I'm with you. I really liked him as a player for a while. I thought he was a great addition, and he's even just continued to make some real strides here recently. Has done it against some great competition.
Derek Piper, Cade's Illinois baseball team is going for a Big Ten championship. Is he all in on this team? You guys got to see a couple games here recently?
Yeah, man. He's been to 2 games here in the last 2 weeks. We caught a game of the Iowa series on Friday. He's been a good luck charm. They've hit bombs when he's gone there, and they've won games. So he only made it through 6 on Friday night, but I'll give him a pass. He was ready to go to sleep, so we left. But, yeah, I'm happy for Dan Hartlib and that squad. They're a fun watch to hit. I think they've hit, 94, 96 bombs so far, which is top 10, 15 in the country. Looking forward to hopefully getting them into the NCAA tournament. So shout out to them.
Derek Piper, you're the goods. Thanks for getting us caught up on everything Illinois basketball, man.
As always, man.